Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. So let's talk about the new moon in Scorpio and just the Scorpio season in general. There's a lot to cover today. Before I do, just one very quick announcement. I recently offered a workshop on the Venus five-pointed star. That is the 5 VSP points that we all have in our birth chart. And that was for Australian-based people and USA-based people. And there's been a calling, a small calling thus far from some people in Europe who are interested in having me run that workshop again, which I'm happy to do. I'm just trying to get some numbers because I'd like a small group for that, at least a small group. Some of you have seen the announcement I made, and a couple of you have responded. Just to be clear, you don't need to be born in Europe, because somebody asked, do I need to be born in Europe to participate? No, absolutely not. It's just the reason I'm doing it for Europe-based people is because the times that I did it for Australia and USA just did not suit for people who are in Europe, because they'd have to be up at 3-4 in the morning, some crazy hour like that. And I did have a very dedicated person who did join, actually from Europe, in the workshop that I previously offered. So God bless her, because she's just extremely dedicated. So anyway, if you live in Europe and you are interested in participating in this workshop, which I highly, highly, highly recommend, it goes for about 4 hours. It's quite deep, quite complex, quite a few layers. However, I would say that it is suitable for beginners as well as it is for advanced. The reason I say that is because whether you're advanced in astrology or whether you're a beginner, this is a particular model that would be incredibly powerful to have in your toolbox, in your learning of astrology. So it doesn't matter where you're at with your level of study, this is appropriate for anyone across the board, really. So if you are in Europe and you're interested, just drop me an email and we can go from there. I'm hopefully wanting to do it in the next 2 weeks. So just depends how many people contact me. Okay, so that aside, I pulled up a card for our new moon in Scorpio, and I got the Ace of Swords. And I thought, well, you know, that's a really interesting card. I really love this picture, actually, the depiction of it in this particular deck. It looks very Scorpio, doesn't it? It's got the roses, that deep sort of red color, and then you see all those butterflies, which is the very beautiful symbol for Scorpio, of course, because the butterfly is always about transformation, right? And so we can keep this card in mind as we're looking at the new moon in Scorpio and the things that I'm going to share about it. But just very briefly, it's basically about mental clarity, right? It's handling problems from a place of intellect and not allowing the heart to rule, but allowing the mind to be clear. And it gets to the truth, cuts through all the bullshit, and it speaks to the truth of power, okay? Or to the truth. It speaks truth to power, perhaps is a better way of putting it. Card of justice and analytical and ability and so forth. And I think this is going to be an important sort of theme for the Scorpio new moon, because during the Scorpio new moon, Mercury is still in Libra, which is an air sign, which corresponds to the intellect as well, okay? Or certainly having the ability to be objective, detached, and the ability to understand both sides to any situation that you may be questioning, investigating, trying to make a decision and so forth. So mental clarity, cutting through the crap and the bullshit, basically, is what this card represents. So it's very powerful from that level. And because Mercury will still be in Libra and is basically in its shadow period at the moment. So I'm doing this recording on the 29th of October. The new moon in Scorpio is on the 4th or 5th of November, based depending on whether you're in the northern or southern hemisphere. Just a quick note, we've had a lot of storms here in the location that I'm in, and the internet has been playing up. So I'm hoping that it just doesn't cut into this, but if it does, well, you know, it's out of my control. But I just wanted to put that out there and, well, ask the gods to grace me with no interruptions for you guys especially. All right, so the Scorpio new moon. Well, first of all, I had a look at the Scorpio new moon for last year just to see the difference of the locality of things. And there's quite a few significant differences. One thing I noticed that was really interesting was that last year, when we had the new moon in Scorpio, Mars was actually in Aries. And this year, during the new moon in Scorpio, which is just days away, Mars has just ingressed into Scorpio. So Mars actually rules both those signs. You know, traditionally in Hellenistic astrology, Mars is the ruler of both Aries and Scorpio. And as a lot of people sort of refer to the outer planets, the transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, as the modern planets. But I like to refer to them as the planets that correspond to the evolutionary process of everything, of the earth, the soul of the earth, and every soul therein, whether here or whether in a altered, you know, dimension, state of consciousness, wherever it may be. I don't see them as just modern rulers. I see them far greater than that. That term is thrown around quite a lot, but I like to be very clear on my position on that, and that is that these transpersonal planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, they correspond to the fact that we are evolving and everything is always evolving. And so an example of that would be when a planet is discovered, the planet's discovery corresponds to the reality, as in the earthly reality, and everything that was going on the earth plane at the time of that planet's discovery. And so the events and the nature of reality at that time really are depicted, are described by the essence and the energy of that planetary body during its discovery time. That's something that one would study and explore and look into if you were studying the history of the world, really, and the astrological bodies as they are continuously discovered. So Pluto, in other words, is what I'm trying to get at. Some people might say it's a secondary ruler to Scorpio, but I wouldn't really say that. I would say that from an evolutionary perspective, Pluto is absolutely the ruler of Scorpio, but I would never discount Mars as being the co-ruler. Whereas some people might see it the other way around and say Mars is the ruler and Pluto is the co-ruler. Well, I see it the other way around. So anyway, that's up to you. The point being, though, that this new moon in Scorpio this year in 2021 and last year in 2020, Mars was in its natural ruling signs. And I think that's an important point, and I'll unpack that as I continue. This particular new moon, actually, before I go into the new moon, let me just make a few comments about the Scorpio season, the Scorpio energy, the Scorpio frequency, the energies that we've stepped into just very recently. And, you know, there's a lot of energies in Scorpio. We have the sun. Shortly, we're going to have a new moon in Scorpio. Mercury is going to ingress into Scorpio, and Mars would have ingressed into Scorpio as well at the time of the new moon. So that's, oh, that would have sounded terrible. I'm sorry. That was a very loud motorbike. There's an abundance of Scorpio energy. Now, Scorpio is a yin feminine sign. In other words, it takes us in and under. It takes us inside in the landscape of our soul. It takes us into the inner introspective, reflective components of our beingness, of our experiences. it takes us into areas that could be quite uncomfortable, quite confronting. And if you think about it from the point of view of the the sun's energy, in terms of the sun's journey around the zodiac, when it starts in Aries, which is where it begins, 21st of March every year, it's the sun is giving birth, right, through Aries, and then it's just slowly unfolding its own solar energy through the signs, which naturally each archetype corresponds to different developmental aspects, if you like, of our own creation and experience. Now, the sun in Libra, which is where it was just up till a few days ago, was really exactly at the midpoint, 180 degrees away from where it began in Aries. Right. So we've come around halfway through the zodiac relative to the sun's journey and movement. And in Libra, where the last month it's been, in many cases, it's been very much associated to law matters, right? To lawsuits, law cases, a lot of law situations transpiring, namely because of the nature of reality and everything that's going on. And I don't need to go into details about that. We are all well aware, although there are differences of how it looks, of how that story is unfolding in every country, and even in every state, in every country. There are, in some cases, there are minor differences, in some cases, there are huge differences. But it is fair to say that collectively, there's been a strong stream and storyline of matters around fairness, justice, equality, and what I would call pro-choice, right? So that's been a very strong theme. There's a lot going on those levels, a lot of which isn't presented in mainstream media or mainstream social media or whatever it is, because as we know, there's such a huge level of censorship that's going on, right? And so, yeah, it's just up to each of us to investigate that further if we wish to. But the point is that the sun in Libra and Mercury's journey in Libra, which has been there for a long time because Mercury went retrograde on the 25th degree of Libra, right, with that square to Pluto. And so we've had Mercury in Libra really for about, around about 2 months, which is a long time. And moving forward towards this new moon, Mercury being in its shadow, it's going to, just before the full moon, it's going to reach the exact degree where it went retrograde, thus its shadow period, right? And therefore it's going to form that square again to Pluto. So even though Mercury has gone direct just recently, just be mindful and be aware that certain things that you've had to reflect on, take a pause, stop to find out more information on whatever spectrum that may be, a lot of what you've been gathering and contemplating and rethinking will probably really take its final sort of course, if you like, or step, or ready to kind of really now plunge forward relative to ideas, will be when Mercury squares Pluto again, and that will be a process of perhaps some tension, conflict. That could be more of an inner sort of conflict in our own thinking, but it can also be a very powerful process in transforming some of the ideas that we've had. We've thought about something that we want to do because of this and that and that, and we haven't been able to take the next step, let's say. And so what I'm saying is that when Mercury squares this Pluto again, that there will be some release that takes place. There will be some new way of looking at a particular idea or plan that you had. So that's just an interesting thing to observe relative to Mercury, especially because Mercury's been retrograde so long in Libra, right? Now, with the whole Scorpio season, especially at the backdrop of the current nature of reality, where there are extreme levels of transformation going on and extreme desires being either blocked or, on the other hand, at the same time, and needing to propel forward, to move forward with things, right? The underlying theme in this, and this is relevant to the new moon, is the Uranus square Saturn aspect, right? Because in this new moon, Uranus is opposite the new moon, like to the degree. So it's a very, very close opposition. And so Uranus is going to have the loudest voice. And thank God for that, quite frankly. But Saturn is there in the picture as well, right? Because it's actually squaring the new moon, okay? And it's squaring Uranus as well. So it's actually a T square. Now, T squares are pretty challenging configurations, but I'll actually talk about that when I bring up the chart a bit more, but I'm just kind of flagging what are the major sort of themes about this new moon. And more importantly, this whole Scorpio season, because we've reached a point within the zodiac, as I was saying before, where the sun, was traversing through Libra, and Libra it's a cardinal sign, okay? So it is proactive. It is about taking action and initiating. It's a masculine sign, actually. So stepping into a feminine sign, the masculine always takes us out and the feminine always invites us in. That's just a standard expression, if you like, of all the archetypes, the feminine archetypes and the masculine archetypes. So stepping with the sun now into Scorpio, we're invited into a journey, a deep journey. A powerful portal is opening up for us to actually further dive more deeply into the matters of our life and where we stand with any situation or the conditions around us. It is a time to really reflect and go much more deeply into exploring your personal circumstances. I'm sort of I'm pausing a little bit because I'm trying to describe this in a way that's applicable to any human being, regardless of their circumstances. So that's why I'm not pointing to very specific sort of circumstances, but we can all kind of fill in the blanks and connect the dots, because what I'm actually suggesting applies to all of us from the point of view of our own personal life story and circumstances. Now, Scorpio is such a fascinating, complex archetype. And think about all the symbols or totems or animals that it has associated with it. And I think it's the only one that has so many as well. The Scorpio has the scorpion, it has the eagle, and it has the phoenix, okay, as its three sort of totem animals. And they are reflecting and representing the different levels of Scorpio, because that's the nature of Scorpio. It's not one dimensional, not that anything is one dimensional necessarily, but Scorpio has such incredible depth, in terms of where it can go, how deep it can actually dive. And that just depends on how we are operating as an individual, as a soul, as a personality, as a person, and so forth. And the scorpion is the, what we could say, the more personality based level of Scorpio, which is driven 100% through its instincts and its desires. And those desires can be anything from death, killing, to passionately loving and obsessed with something or someone, right? It's the desires, okay? The desires at the personality material level. The eagle is a more conscious, more awake, more aware uh, representation of the scorpion. It has a deeper and slightly more detached, you could say, view into whatever it's zooming in. Think about the nature of the scorpion, that the actual little creature, and think about the eagle, right? The eagle is much more free and just has a much wider scope of view in whatever it's zooming into. It does that zoom thing, right? Which is the Scorpio, the nature of Scorpio. When it looks into something, when it engages with something, it zooms in very, very deeply. But the eagle does that in such a broad way, and it has the ability to just to have a larger scope, whereas the scorpion is more associated with the earth, right? Because it's literally planted, on the earth plane, isn't it? It can't fly, for instance. So it's kind of, it's hanging around the murky kind of waters, and it's hiding, right? It's very Scorpio. That's what it is, the scorpion. Story that I like, which I've mentioned previously, I might have even mentioned it last year, is the little story of the frog and the scorpion. And there's just this frog and there's this scorpion, and the scorpion asks the frog if he could jump on his back and get a little ride over to the other side. And the frog is a little bit hesitant and says, well, how can I trust you? You might sting me and kill me along the way. And the scorpion says, no, I'm not going to do that. I just want to ride over to the other side. And then, halfway through, the scorpion gets on the frog's back, and halfway through, the scorpion, stings the frog, and then they both just they've both just gone under. But as they're going under, the frog says, well, why did you do that? Why did you kill me, sort of thing? And I've heard two different responses, and this might just be people's interpretation and how different words are used differently. But one expression I've heard is where the scorpion says, I felt like it, I just felt like doing it. And I like that particular expression, because Scorpio is 100% driven by what it feels. The other expression I've heard is the scorpion says, well, I just went by my instincts. And that's also a great response as well, or an expression to understand the scorpion archetype, because that's how Scorpio functions. It does everything based on its instincts, right? Its desires and how it feels. And those feelings are incredibly deep and can be incredibly overwhelming, because there's no thought process. It's literally just the deepest feeling of whatever you feel in any given moment, and the act that will follow that, right, based on those deep feelings. So I guess when we are experiencing this Scorpion season, it's a good way to kind of keep that in mind with how we are operating, right? And how we are responding and reacting to our desires in any situation. Are we purely responding or reacting from those lower desire earthly personality based level or matters of Scorpio, or are we able to transcend to that eagle sort of level and see a much broader, a very deep but broader perspective? And then if we go even higher than that, we've got the phoenix, right, as another representation of Scorpio, and that's the ultimate level of Scorpio in terms of how it transforms and regenerates itself in any situation that it finds itself in. Another good analogy is when we are going through experiences in life where we're having what is often termed as the dark night of the soul. And I always say this, I don't know why it's called the dark night of the soul, because that immediately implies it's one night, and it's never one night. It can sometimes be years for people, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's days, months, it just depends. But when we are going through what is called the dark night of the soul, which can have many interpretations and many different perspectives, but part of the way I sort of see that is that it's that incredibly deep place that we get to with our deepest pains, actually, and where our deepest fears reside and our deepest limitations also reside. And it's where we have to look at ourselves so brutally honest in truth, because Scorpio also is an archetype that I would associate with the deepest truths of all things. When you go into the depths of Scorpio, there's no, you can't bullshit a Scorpio. You can't. Scorpio just cuts through all the bullshit, and that's why it was so interesting that this card came up, the Ace of Swords, which is cutting through whatever lies or misrepresentation or confusion or whatever it may be, right? So the Phoenix, as I was saying, is that component of Scorpio within us when we are going through something very deep in our life. It could be something that goes on for quite some time. It's a really painful process and journey. There's nothing easy about it, nothing easy about it at all. But if we find ourselves eventually transforming through that and growing and evolving through that, that's when we go to the other stages of becoming the eagle and then the phoenix. But to become the phoenix has to it has to burn and rise from the ashes, right? So that metaphor is a beautiful metaphor to describe those deep, deep journeys that we go through, where we have to let go of what was, where we have to let go of a loved one, where we have to let go of a relationship, where we have to let go of a job, whatever it may be. Anything that comes to an end in our life, and we have many little endings, little ones, and we have some huge endings throughout the course of our life. And then of course the actual ending of the physicality of life as well. So nothing is permanent. Everything is always going through a cycle of birth and rebirth, and that's what we are doing all the time. And as I've said before, when we go to sleep every night, that is basically a scorpionic experience, right? Because every night we go to sleep, it's Scorpio and Pisces, actually. It's Scorpio because we sort of we die as it were rather. We go to sleep. We don't control what's going to happen. We just have to surrender, and that's where Pisces comes into it. We surrender into this experience we call sleep every night. And in some very traditional wisdom, Eastern teachings, it is actually said that the and this is hard to grasp from a left brain perspective, but the the experience that we have when we go to sleep, which we define as sleep, the conscious mind goes to sleep, but the unconscious component is completely active and awake and doing a lot of things. It is said in Eastern teachings that that's actually the real state, and that this reality, the conscious state on a day-to-day basis, that's where we're actually really asleep. It's an interesting teaching and concept. I don't have a problem in understanding that, but I'll leave that to you to decide. The point, though, is that we go through many deaths and rebirths all the time, and we are always being asked to surrender every single night. So when we are going through these really intense, and at the moment, the whole world is still going through incredibly intense experiences, a lot of loss, a lot of sense of disempowerment is coming through for a lot of people, sense of not being able to be in control of what's happening, and so on and so forth. This has been a theme that's been there for quite some time, right? So the ultimate transformation with the Phoenix is, it's not so much about what's happening out there, but it is actually what you've been able to surrender to die to within, right? And certainly the external conditions and circumstances will perhaps connect to that in some kind of way. But it's regardless of what's happening externally, which is just basically a reflection and a mirror of everything that's going on within, because whatever state we hold inside, whatever we feel and think about and perceive, whatever conditioned narratives or imprints we have internally, very much defines and describes what we witness and perceive out there. Sure, there is another level where there's this collective narrative going on, and we're all subject to that. But even though there is this one narrative playing out, we still all have our own individual, unique reaction, response, experience, and perspective to that, right? So that's why it always comes back to where we stand within, what we are holding inside us. And so the point with Scorpio season is the absolute powerful opportunity to go into those corners of the landscape within that you normally wouldn't, to probe and investigate and look at where you have grown, what you have outgrown, what you are ready to confront, what you are ready to release. And whilst we have this experience every year from the point of view of the sun going into Scorpio, it's not the same experience every year, because you are not at the same place every year. Even though in some cases, you might be observing somebody else's life and you think they are just the same, they're the same person doing the same thing, and etc., etc. We never know what is going on inside a person's interior, inside the landscape of their soul, in their private world. We just have assumptions, about what we perceive, but only each of us alone knows what our soul is going through. And whilst on the external things may appear happy and everything's fine, well, there's much more to it. So needless to say, with this yin inner Scorpio energy, it is an invitation, a portal that opens for us to navigate a journey where we can go in as a Scorpion, allow our instincts and feelings to go into the deepest wells, the deepest waters of our own soul, right? And also zoom in with the eagle eyes, to get a broader vision and view of what we are seeing there. And while we are in there and down there and under there, to sort through what we need to sort through, and then rise as the phoenix through the ashes. That's really the portal of invitation with the sun in Scorpio. And so this new moon is really an extension of that, and describing to us the lunation cycle for the next 4 weeks, right? That's the new moon is always a sun moon conjunction. It's a new cycle. It's a planting a new seed, as we know. We cannot see what it will be until the cycle completes, which is 4 weeks later, right? So it is a powerful time for purposeful intentions, to really go into those deeper layers, landscape of your soul, and set forth and plant the seed for purposeful intentions. That can be one thing, it can be several things. And it doesn't matter what it is. That is up to you, because it's described by you and what you're feeling and where you are at in life and what you're ready to work with. But it is a very, very powerful new moon. Let me just actually bring up the chart as we continue. Okay, I'll just move that there. And so let me just show you, this is the new moon for last year, right? It was on the 15th of November, 2020. So there's the new moon in Scorpio. It was 23 degrees of Scorpio. You can see there's Mars in Aries, as I mentioned before. Where are you, my little cursor? Oh, Mars in Aries, new moon in Scorpio, and look at Venus. She was in Libra. Mercury was already in Scorpio, and we had a Pluto Jupiter conjunction, and Saturn, of course, as well, and of course Pallas Athena. That was that quadruple stellium conjunction of the grandfather, the granddaughter, and the father, right? Jupiter, Pallas Athena, Saturn. So that was a really, really powerful configuration there. We've seen a lot of how that's unfolded. And look at the nodes. The nodes were 20 Sag and Gemini. And I'm pointing this out for a reason. Now let me just clear that and go to the new moon chart from the present. Okay, so here's a new moon for in a few days' time. 5th of November, Southern Hemisphere. 4th of November, Northern Hemisphere. So again, let me just grab some assistance. This mouse is really quite annoying, actually. Okay, so there's the new moon, 12 degrees and 40 minutes of Scorpio. You can see Mars has ingress into Scorpio. That would have happened a couple of days before this. And you can see Mercury is in Libra. You can see that Uranus is exactly opposite the new moon. And you can see that Saturn basically forms a square to the new moon. And of course, it's still squaring Uranus, hence the T-square, right? Now, I'm going to throw a positive spin on this because there are some really positive things. Given that we've progressed forward with what's been happening on the earth plane, the collective story and reality, and we are all in our own unique position around that. The Scorpio new moon, as I said, it's a portal invitation towards that deeper journey into the landscape of your soul and confronting what you are really ready to rise through. But before you rise through it, you've got to do this, as I said, you've got to do the scorpion thing, which is feeling it all, having the perhaps very strong feeling states or moments or sleepless nights. It could be any of those things, really. But it is ultimately about the potential regeneration and transformation. And actually, my favorite story, myth that is, that I love to ascribe to the archetype Scorpio is the myth of Persephone, the daughter of Ceres, also known as Demeter, the Earth Mother, which is a principle of nurture or lack of nurture, and the principle of loss and grief, but at the same time, the principle of renewal and regeneration as well. And very simply put, and most of you are aware of this myth, Persephone, the daughter of Ceres, was abducted by Pluto into the underworld, where there's a lot to that myth, there's a lot to that story, and I'm not going to unpack it here today, but the symbolism of that myth is very much about our own personal experience of having to have to die, psychological deaths, emotional deaths, the experience of learning that nothing is permanent, the experience of having to understand that there is this process and experience of grief and loss. At the same time, through that comes the experience of transformation, renewal, and rebirth. But we cannot give birth or rebirth until we've actually have died to something else. So what did Persephone have to kind of die to or give up or surrender to? It was her innocence, really. It was the innocence, the attachment that she had to her mother, the overprotective mother who wouldn't let her out of her sight, which in plain simple psychology interprets into a young woman who needed to go out into life and experience what it means to have, a variety of experiences. That's life. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. When we are, wrapped in cotton wool and protected all the time, and are not able to experience things, well, that actually stunts our evolution and our growth. So the experience of Scorpio is to go through those deep, painful experiences of loss, of dying to something, of having something die in your life, and it's often a deeply painful encounter that we feel like we are dying, or we feel like maybe we want to die, sort of thing. That brings up a lot of different experiences. It depends who you are, and it depends what's happening and what you are going through. But even though that sounds pretty dark, it is dark because it's Scorpio, and Scorpio takes us into the dark shadow components of our soul. So, there's no point in trying to make it fairies and butterflies. it's not fairies and butterflies at all. It's actually, you know, the true deepest shadow work that we can do, the alchemical work that we want to do from a soul level in for our own evolution and growth. This is the time. This is the portal. This is the window that opens up for us to go in there, right? So there is all of that contained in this new moon. And then we have Uranus opposite it. So there's an indication there of some sort of it's going to play out differently for different people, and certainly different in the collective paradigm as well. But there is a call and a voice there to help us actually either get to some kind of breakthrough, some kind of, you know, flash of insight and understanding, you know, having being able to think outside of the box, Saturn, think outside of the square, Saturn. Saturn rules boxes, corners, squares, lines. And Uranus rules everything beyond that. There are no bounds with Uranus. Uranus takes us outside of that Saturn frame. And that's why we are able to have mental breakthroughs or visions or flashes of insight, intuition, like electrical impulses just flying into your consciousness, giving you some kind of ability to have a breakthrough through the way you are perceiving a situation. So there is all of that in the mix of this new moon. There is also the sudden, unexpected turn of events that can take place as well, because Uranus corresponds to what's sudden, what's unexpected. It can be chaotic. It can be traumatic. The reason trauma comes into the sphere of Uranus is because it shocks us out of our slumber, out of our comfort zone, and out of our structured, controlled reality and everything we are trying to hold on to. Uranus swoops in and says, well, I'm just going to spin all that around very suddenly and throw you into a different position so that you can actually break through the walls of Saturn. So I see this as a really positive, electrifying, powerful energy corresponding to the new moon cycle, giving us that ability to have a greater sense of insight and sudden breakthroughs where we have perhaps felt we've been hitting a wall, where we've felt restrained, restricted, unable to move, blocked, shut down, closed off. These are all Saturn words. Now, even though Saturn is in this picture, like I said, it is, because it's square the new moon and it's square Uranus, so it's a T-square. The stronger point in this, as in the new moon, is actually Uranus, because it's the closest. It's 12 degrees and the new moon is 12 degrees as well. Let me just clear that. Look at Uranus, 12 degrees, and the new moon is 12 degrees as well. They're only basically 7 minutes apart in arc, right? That's not a lot. It's actually different to 7 minutes on your clock. It's not the same time as that. It's 7 minutes in celestial astrological time, right? But the point is that they are very, very close in opposition to each other. Now, you know, oppositions, we have to always keep in mind as well that oppositions tend to create a polarized energy. So the Scorpio new moon is at the personality level, it is about control and power. And at more evolved levels, it is about the deepest personal transformations that we are ready to undergo at this point in our growth and journey and life story. And then there is the opposition to Uranus, which can get projected outside of us, outside of ourselves, where something comes in from out there, as it were, that shocks us if we're trying to maintain this level of control and power in a fixed and rigid way. And it will be fixed and it will be rigid if it's coming through that is wanting to maintain that control and power, because this T square is in fixed signs. Scorpio is fixed, Taurus is fixed, Aquarius is fixed. And Saturn is the apex planet in this T square. Saturn as an apex planet in a T square can be, at worst, at the shadow level, personality level side of things, it can be the, let me see, I've made a note of this, desire to overpower and manipulate all matters under one's authority and unlikely to share the control seat with any others. Now, I can tell you who that corresponds to in this state that I live in from a political perspective relative to laws and things that are going on here, and that's basically just our state premier, who's been he's been named as Dan the Dictator because he's a dictator. That's all there is to it. That's not a personal perspective. That's just based on action that he's taken, which corresponds to a non-democratic way of life. It corresponds to tyranny and control. So, you know, this new moon from the level of that particular individual could be a little bit hard for those that seek sovereignty, pro-choice and freedom, liberation and democracy. But what I really love about this is that Uranus is going to have the final say. A, because it's exactly opposite the new moon. And B, because the opposition is the second sort of most powerful aspect. If you think about the Ptolemaic aspects, which are the traditional aspects, conjunction, square, opposition, trine, and I've just forgotten the other one. Is it inconjunct or sextile? I can't remember. Anyway, the conjunction is always the most powerful aspect. No, there's no two ways about it. And then the next one in is opposition. So think about it. Saturn is square. Sure, squares are extremely powerful, very dynamic. They create necessary change, uncomfortable but necessary change. But oppositions create a bloom, illumination of crystal clear awareness. And so Uranus is offering us a gift here with this new moon cycle to plant seeds of having a greater level of awareness, insight, intuition, understanding into how we are progressing forward in our own personal circumstances and journey with the choices we are making based on the conditions of our life, right? And Saturn, as I said, the shadow side being squaring this new moon, and of course still square Uranus. We've got one more square to go with, I'll be exact, Saturn and Uranus, which is in December. So we're still under the beams of the Saturn square Uranus, which is the consensus status quo versus freedom, liberation, sovereignty, individuation, thinking outside of the box, thinking for yourself, making decisions for yourself. It's pretty straightforward, really, in that way. So Saturn squaring this new moon at a positive level, what this can be is the wisdom of patience, proper planning, intensely purposeful. The intensely comes because of all the, well, first of all, the Scorpio new moon and the fixed energies. Fixed energy is, it's immovable. You cannot push it out the way or move it. And that can be sometimes a blessing, and sometimes that can be the worst thing. It can be a blessing because when it's a blessing, it means that you are able to stand with stay with a circumstance, a situation that needs staying power. You need that staying power to stand with that situation and see it through. You can't do that if you're out of there. If you, I'm out of here, this is just too much. See you later. This is the benefit of fixed signs. They help us have staying power in situations. On the other hand, the shadow side to that, of course, is not letting go and persisting to the 9th degree that there is no other way out. There is no other way to see this. There is nothing else to do. I can only do it this way. That's the fixed nature of fixed signs, can lock us into this fixed attitude of there is no other way. And that's the downside. And so this is where our own level of awareness, insight, understanding, objectivity, critical, analytical, mental skills, critical analysis, and so forth, is very important when it comes to situations with energy that has a fixedness about it. Now, where can the fixedness actually help serve us in a positive way that is congruent with our growth? And where is it where we are just basically stuck and we've just hit a wall and we're just stuck with that wall and we can't see anything else? This is going to be the question to ask. Now, the Saturn here can offer the support of, as I said, as patience. You may need to have a lot of patience right now. And through this lunation cycle, there's still a lot of things going on. We know that, right? Things are moving fairly quickly in a lot of ways, but in a lot of other ways, they are not. They are moving very quickly based on the external narrative, because there's a particular storyline that's unfolding, and that's just reached its next level, which is why it's moving out pretty quickly. But within that exists our own personal experience and response, and how we are living that, right? And it's not so easy to for everybody to just go, you know what, yeah, screw you, see you later, I'm you know, whatever, right? It's not so easy. There are many people have a lot of different circumstances that involve family, children, you know, mortgage, paying bills, and you know, there's a number of different things, survival. And I understand that, but I would just like to encourage you to keep in mind that this is a really powerful portal of being able to work through some pretty deep resistances that may be there, your own personal resistances to things. And this is about seeing the truth. Remember the card that came up, clarity, cutting through mental blockages. So we may have a real fixed attitude about a perspective we have at the moment about how we're seeing things. Well, with Uranus opposite this new moon, there is ample opportunity for breakthrough, sudden unexpected release and breakthrough of things that can turn things around for you. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that this is enough to radically change your whole entire life at the moment. That's ridiculous. And anybody who gets online as an astrologer and says, oh, this new moon is going to change your life and all this bullshit, it's just misleading. And I don't like to mislead. The fact is that you need to be looking at everything else that's going on in your chart, because the lunation cycles are really acting as a timer for things to kind of kick off or be illuminated and so forth. That it's a timer more than anything else. A timer of what? A timer of other much deeper, larger things that are actually going on in your chart. This is where it pays to have a reading, you know, have an in-depth look into everything that's going on in your chart at the moment. For instance, we have a new moon and a full moon, you know, every month. That's nothing new. But I do like this new moon very much because it is opposite Uranus. And I love Uranus. I mean, I'm pro-choice. I'm freedom orientated. I'm a free thinker. I've always thought outside the box. I've never subscribed to consensus reality, the patriarchal consensus model of marriage, constitution, whatever. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, each to their own. I'm just simply saying, for me, when Uranus comes in, even though it came in at a point in my life where it created the biggest shock I've ever experienced in my life, which was completely traumatic, and that was my father leaving this world. Uranus was very much involved in what was happening in my chart at that time. And yeah, it was traumatic and painful and a shock, and it still sometimes is. That energy kind of still resides inside me in certain places and gets triggered sometimes. It was also the catalyst for some really big processes of liberation and freedom in my life. It did change my whole life direction. It literally did. I basically stopped engaging with the consensus reality level of employment, for instance. And there were pretty serious things that happened where the universe, it's like the universe was saying, well, I'm going to literally create this situation to shock you out of here so that you can actually get onto what's totally aligned for you, which was for me to actually start doing YouTube, teaching, etc., right? Because before that, I wasn't doing any YouTube stuff. I was very quiet and private. Nobody knew who I was. I was doing readings privately, where I just had a very small clientele base because nobody knew who I was. I was just working with a very limited, available people in whatever location I've been in at different times, because I've traveled a lot, I've lived overseas a lot, and I haven't always lived in this particular location where I'm at the moment. My last stint living overseas was a 7-year stint, so I've been around. But now, how did I get to all of that? I know how I got to it. I was just simply saying that, it's misguiding and misleading to assume that your whole life is going to completely transition and transform just from a new moon and Uranus being opposite it. But is this a catalyst and a timer for perhaps other things that are going on in your chart that would correspond to this? Yeah, 100%. And that's what you'd need to be looking for. But I'm not doing personal readings at the moment. I'm just kind of offering the collective sort of representation of these archetypes, right? So yeah, I really love this new moon. I'm looking forward to this cycle. Let me see, what else did I want to say? Well, I mean, I will come back and actually talk about Mars ingressing into Scorpio, and Mercury will ingress into Scorpio just a day or so later. And Venus, she's run through her beautiful journey in Sag, and she's going to enter Capricorn the following day. If I have time, I'll come back and talk about that as well. All planets are direct except Uranus, Chiron, and Neptune. We've got a lunar eclipse coming up this month in Taurus, and that's the beginning of the nodes. Look at where the nodes are, right? 1 degree 44 minutes of Sag, Gemini. So they're basically reaching a point where they're getting very, very close to their transition into the next pair that they're going to run through, which will be Taurus and Scorpio. I think that's going to be a very interesting journey of the nodes in Scorpio Taurus. I don't think it's going to be easy. I mean, nothing in life is easy at the moment anyway, right? We all know that. But the nodes, they have a journey of about 19 months. So it's not like a couple of weeks or a couple of months. It's a long time. And that's going to be the Taurus Scorpio nodal shift. And journey is going to naturally speak to the collective paradigm. Think about Taurus and Scorpio. What do those archetypes represent? Taurus, very simply, survival. And Scorpio, the release and the death of things as well. Taurus, attachment. Scorpio's what comes in and says, no, we have to let go of that. We have to just leave it. We've outgrown it, whatever it may be. I'll come back and talk about that in a lot of depth because I'm really interested in this nodal shift, particularly against the backdrop of what's going on for us. So yes, I will be back to talk about many, many things as certainly as time permits as well. So I'll leave it here, guys, and I'm hoping that the sharing today connected with you, was helpful in some kind of way. Just write your questions and comments below. Email me if you're interested in the Venus pentagram, 5 Venus star points in your chart if you are based in Europe. Wishing you all a powerful new moon in Scorpio. And I guess, new moon in Scorpio, Scorpio season, Mars in Scorpio, Mercury in Scorpio. We absolutely are being directed into the landscape of the soul and looking at what we are either fearful of, resistant of, and also ready to release as well. It's an intense, a really intense, journey. And when you're in it, it feels like, is this ever going to end? And it does, because the sun will ingress into Sagittarius, 23rd or something of November. And the most beautiful analogy I love, or metaphor, which comes from a movie scene for the transition of Scorpio to Sagittarius, which is what we are all going to encounter just in a few weeks' time, once we go through the underworld, the dark corners and places of our soul, the introspection, reflection, confrontation, examination, so many words you could use, Scorpio. After we've gone through that process, and naturally I will come back and talk about that, the sun will be in Sagittarius, and here's the most beautiful image. And you have to be old enough to have seen this movie, or maybe you've seen it or heard of it. Maybe your parents have played it for you. It's the movie by Indiana Jones, or the movie rather is called Indiana Jones, with Harrison Ford. And there's one scene where he's in a cave, and he's in a cave and he's in extreme danger. There's snakes everywhere. There's, dark entities. There's all sorts of dark shit going on there. And he's in complete danger. That's Scorpio, right? That's the territory it takes you into. And at one stage, what happens is he thinks he's going to die. And all of a sudden, there's an opening of part of the cave that opens up, and the first thing he sees is this bright blue sky. Imagine that he's in pitch black darkness, can't see anything. He just knows there's threat and danger all around him, and he has to figure out and navigate how to survive this and how to not be killed. And then when he sees the blue sky, that's Sag, that's Sagittarius. The bright blue sky in the day, that's Jupiter, right? That gives you that expansive vision and view. And so we come out of the darkness, the danger, and we come and rise. We are reborn into the light of day, as it were. That's what happens when you come out of Scorpio energy and go into Sag energy. And so where there was this journey of dread or fear or any of the things that it brings up, and of course there's the promise and potential for renewal, regeneration, rebirth, etc., depending on how you work with this, of course. But once you come out of that, which is, it's so freaking intense, it can feel so draining and exhausting. But then when you come out and you see that bright blue Sag, you are basically filled with complete and utter optimism and hope and faith. And so that transition is gold. It's a really beautiful transition. And so that's what we've got to look forward to as well. But I like the Scorpio season, the Scorpio energy, the Scorpio full moon, Scorpio new moons. It does bring up a lot of stuff for sure. But, I personally have an incredibly strong Pluto in my chart. It aspects everything in my chart. I've got a Venus Scorpio star point. So the Scorpio territory for me is a very known place to be in. I've been familiar with that, I think, whilst I was in my mother's womb. I could tell you a story about that maybe some other time. Anyway, yeah. I'll see you guys soon. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Much love. Happy new moon. It's funny saying happy new moon for a moon in Scorpio, because Scorpio is not about happiness, but it is about being real and getting to the truth of things. And that eagle eyes, Scorpio, zooming right in, cutting through all the bullshit. Cutting through. There's a sword, Ace of Swords. Cut through it. And, it'll be fine. It will be fine no matter what it is. See you soon.